In today's episode, we're going to be looking at what we really mean by coaching and what does it mean to be a leader who coaches. Stick to the end where I'm going to give you a couple of tests for yourself just to see where you're at with your coaching. Welcome to Coaching with Chris. Okay, so what actually is coaching? As a leader, the way that you go about yourself in different situations, we might call that our style, the way that we operate. And that might be because of the way that you were brought up, your personality, the way that you've been influenced by other leaders, but you're probably going to have some sort of natural style of leadership. Now, coaching is basically a style of leadership that you can choose to have. And I like to think of styles on a bit of a continuum like this. So on the right hand side we have what we call a directive style of leadership. So a directive leader is someone who basically gives you orders, gives you direction, tells you what you need to do. And you know what? There are many situations where this style of leadership can be very, very helpful and very, very appropriate. For example, if you think you're in a crisis situation where everyone's running around and they don't know what to do, having a very directive style of leadership is going to be exactly the right thing there, where you can cut through everything, let people know exactly what they need to do so they can focus on the task in hand. But imagine for a minute that your leadership style is always like that. And if you put yourself in the shoes of the people that you're leading, what that's going to be like for them. So always being told the answer, always being told what to do, probably going to be quite disempowering if you're always at this end of the spectrum and not really leaving much room for your own thought and creativity. Now down the other end of the spectrum, we have a coaching style. So a coaching style is very much in contrast to a directive style. So a coaching style is very much about helping the person find out for themselves what their way forward is, what their answer is, what they need to work on, what they want to work on. Taking that kind of approach is much more inspiring and also gets a lot more ownership because people are coming up with the answers themselves and deciding what they want to work on, and that's actually much more empowering. So both of these styles can be appropriate in situations, but the question is, which style do you want to choose? Do you want to take more of a coaching approach, which means you're going to be down that end? Or are you going to take more of a directive approach? And where do you snap back to? What's your kind of default style? What's your starting point here? Do you start in the directive space? Or are you naturally more down in the coaching space? And that's the difference between what really great leaders can do. They're not stuck in one space. They're not stuck in a directive space. They're not stuck in one coaching space. They can react to a situation and they can adapt their style to be what's appropriate, but they can adapt down at one end of the spectrum or the other. Now, having a coaching approach means that you're probably leaning much more towards the left-hand side of that style than the right-hand side of that style. So have a think for a minute about where your natural default style is. Do you tend to be the one that's giving orders or giving the answers? Or do you tend to be the one that's really helping other people work stuff out for themselves? So as a leader, what's it actually like to operate in that coaching space? Let's just have a look at that in a little bit more detail. So the first thing is that if you're in that coaching space, what you're going to be focused on is very much helping that other person work out their way of doing things. What's their solution going to be? What are the challenges that they're going to face doing this? What's the right approach for them? What's their way of doing this? Someone who's more in the directive space is actually going to be focused much more on their way. They've done this before 1,000 times. This is the way we're going to do it. This is just a conversation about how we're going to do it my way. Whereas the coaching space is very much around helping the person think through and work out their way of doing it. Second thing is that someone who's in that coaching space is probably going to be spending most of their time in a conversation actually listening to what the other person is saying. Someone who's in this space, guess what? They're going to be probably doing most of the talking. In fact, the ratio of talking in the directive space is the leader's probably going to be doing 80-90% even of the talking. Down in the coaching space, The other person, not the leader, they're going to be doing most of the talking, and the leader is going to be doing mostly listening. And the reason for that is what the leader is actually going to be doing if they're in the coaching space. If they're not listening, they're going to be asking questions. They're going to be asking questions that help the other person think things through, get out of their comfort zone, think about what's possible, think about the range of options that might be available for them to undertake this thing or to overcome this challenge, or to stretch themselves on what a goal actually might really be like for them. Now, someone who's in the more directive space, they're not really going to be asking questions at all. They're going to be giving answers. They're going to be telling them solutions. They're going to be giving them the wealth of their experience, and this is the way that they need to go about this thing because that worked for me 100 times. When in practice, I think we know that that doesn't necessarily mean to say it's the right thing for the other person. And the last thing is just where someone who's down in the coaching space, where their focus and presence is during a conversation. So if you're in the coaching space, your focus and your presence is 100% on the other person. You're thinking about them, where they need to be, what's right for them. Someone who's down more this space, their focus is actually much more on themselves, what they need to get done, what actions they need that other person to take right now, because we haven't got time, we just need to get on with it and bang, let's do it. So they're two very, very different styles. The coaching space is much more around the other person, helping them find the way forward and listening, asking questions. So just have a think about where you are at. What kind of conversations are you having with your team? Are you the one that's doing most of the talking? Are you the one that's coming up with all the answers and the solutions? And where do you want to be on that continuum? What would it mean for you to get more into the coaching space? I also just wanted to talk about some of the myths that are out there and that exist about what coaching is and what coaching isn't. You know, myth number one, that coaching is just about personal development. It's just when we want to have that conversation with our people around, you know, what training do they want to go on, or where do they want to develop their skills, or, you know, what kind of career options do they want to think about. Now, coaching can definitely be used in that space, but if that's the only space that you're using coaching, you are missing out on the main benefits of coaching. So coaching is really around, how do I get people to be able to do things differently? And as a result of doing those things differently, it plays out in the results they get or the performance that they are having. The first video that I put up, and I'll put a link below to that, showed just some of the real hard evidence that shows that if you take a coaching approach as a leader, the impacts on the performance on an organization are absolutely huge. So myth number one, that it's just about having a development conversation, is completely wrong. Myth number two is that coaching is just having a nice easy chat, a nice comfortable kind of conversation. I think if you look at real coaching conversations, that nothing could be further from the truth. Real coaching conversations are about getting people out of their comfort zone, really challenging their thinking, challenging their assumptions, helping them really think differently. That's not a comfortable conversation. It's a conversation where you're going to be feeling a little bit, oh, crikey, yeah, you know, I need to think about things differently. Here's some other options I hadn't thought about. Why don't I achieve that instead of just staying at this level? They're the kind of things that you talk about in a real coaching conversation. And those things can be really inspiring, really motivating to go and take action. Myth number three is that I need at least an hour to have a coaching conversation, and I just haven't got time to have that with all of my team. Well, you know, the best coaching conversations are the ones that happen in the moment with one of your team, when something's just happened and there's a time to ask some really great questions about that, to coach them in the moment. You know, they're the most powerful, I think, coaching conversations. But often we don't think about that when we're in the moment, or we don't have the right kind of frame or the right kind of questions to ask there. And these are some of the things that we're going to be covering on this channel. How to have in the moment coaching conversations, how to have challenging conversations, and how to help people work stuff out for themselves. So over the coming week, have a think about the following things that will help you work out how much at the moment you're getting into that coaching space as a leader or not. So the first thing to think about and pay attention to is who's doing most of the talking in those conversations that you're having with your team. Are you the one doing most of the talking, or is the other person doing most of the talking? What kind of ratio would you put there between how much you're doing the talking, how much they're doing? Is it 50-50? Are you doing 90% of the talking? Are they doing 10%? What actually is it? So that's the first thing. The second thing to look for is actually who's coming up with the solutions here. Who's coming up with the answers and the way forward? Are you actually helping them come up with the answers? Are they coming up with the solutions that they've thought of themselves? Or actually, are you coming up with the answers and the solutions and sort of influencing them to come up with those same things that you want to happen? So have a think about those two things. And then just reflect about, well, where's my natural style on that directive coaching continuum? You know, are there certain situations where I am able to get into that coaching space? And are there other situations where I just tend to snap back to that directive space? Have a think about that. So look, if this is something that is interesting for you, you want to get more into that coaching space, then we're going to be putting a lot more episodes up on this channel. You can just dip into some of them if you want to, as you need to, or there will be a program for you to follow as well if you want to do that. Keep an eye out for that. So if that's interesting for you and you want to join me on that journey, do click on the subscribe button and also the bell button to get notified of new videos that come up. And I hope to see you very soon.